Hello, my name is Tuji. My presentation is The Truth About the Stories book by Thomas King. Thomas King's book, The Truth About the Stories, was very interesting to read as he used different stories to speak about his childhood and the issue facing Native American from their identity, the racism they face, the oppression, and their history with the government that is trying to take over or perhaps erase their land, culture, and language. King used the pattern of telling different stories as a metaphor that described the reality of Native American lives. King opened his book by representing the turtle story, which was very significant. The story visualized how stories are passed down from one generation to another in the Native American tradition. For many years throughout the history, Native Americans have used oral storytelling to document their history, culture, belief, and language. King talk about the stereotype the outside world have of Native Americans. He say, quote, that is really what photographs are, not records of moments, but rather imaginative acts. Quote. He goes in depth on how some photographers, like Edward Curtis, are not recording the moments in the lives of Native people, but rather the visual stereotype of how a Native American should look: long hair, wearing a choker, or wearing a blanket. This just shows the power of imagery is in creating a stereotype for a certain race or culture. In today's world, we see how the news and mainstream media represent other culture and race, which generate a stereotype in people's minds. Also, King used a powerful story of the coyote and ducks, how the coyote takes a further of the duck's emblem, the human and the earth, the start of further war. He used this story to explain how native people lost their lands under the name of legislation. The story and the struggle of Thomas King and his people resonate with me on a personal level. It reminded me of the story of my people, the Oromo people, the native of East Africa, and their struggle under Ethiopian regime for hundreds of years. Just like King mentioned in the beginning of his book with the turtle story, the Oromo people, similar to the Native American, they use oral tradition to pass down their history from one generation to another. I learned about the battle of Oromo people won through to defend their lands against the government and oppress they face from my father, who learned from his father, who learned from my great grandfather, and the generation before him. If it was not for oral history, I would have never known about Oromo culture or speak the language as the Ethiopian government banned the Oromo language from being spoken until 1991. That was one of the many oppressive acts to demolish the identity of the Oromo people. I can relate to the racist propaganda against Native people. As King was described in his book, Oromo people suffer from propaganda against them by spreading the government. Written history and mainstream media are used to create false story and stereotype about Oromos. Thomas King shows that storytelling is a very powerful tool to represent and document one's identity and history. His book is also telling that the wrong story can create a negative image and a stereotype about certain race or culture. Stories are a form of communication, and King did a great job to express how stories shape who we are and how we see others.